Okay, so when we talked about grammatical criticism, we mentioned that one of the ways of exploring a text, of analyzing it, of seeing what it means, and letting the text speak for itself, is to analyze the words that are being used by the text, right? And one way we do this is through a word study. Now, this is just going to be a quick and simple presentation of how to do a word study, um, and also what some of the pitfalls of doing a word study can be in looking at how to avoid those. So let's just start with a basic sentence in English. All right. Tom felt that he should put his heart into his work. Now, if we were coming to this sentence and we were from a different time and a different culture, we would look at this sentence and try to pick out the words that were going to be important to understanding this text. Now, obviously, we would want to know what all of them meant. But there's a couple words in here that we definitely would want to focus on. One of those is the verb. The verbs are always really rich in meaning, so we'd want to pick out felt. And the other word that we kind of want to look at here that seems important is heart. Okay, so if those are the two words we want to look at. When we do a word study, one of the things that we're going to want to do is find a resource where we can find the meaning of these words. Okay, so if we, for example, in English, we would turn to a dictionary and we would find all these definitions of to feel and heart. Okay, when we are using um, the Hebrew text, we're going to be looking to lexicons and concordances and a few other resources. But the first step in a word study is to search out the meaning of those words. Okay, so here we found that obviously in this sentence we can see the meanings that we're working with of felt and heart, right? To feel in this sense, or in this sentence, means to believe or think, and put his heart into his work, we're referring to his emotional constitution, basic disposition, or character. Now, but let's just take this back as if we didn't know what these words meant, right? If we're coming to this from a different time and a different culture. Okay, so here's the definitions we have for feel. Now, if we broke this down, right, we can see that the first four are physically touching. The next three here, I believe, are testing or examining. Then we have a few here that mean to experience. One is a state of emotions. And the last two mean to believe. Okay, so if we break that down, feel has those five meanings, roughly. And you can see if we pick the meaning that popped up the most, it would mean physically touching. So one of the things we want to avoid in word studies is just picking the meaning that pops up the most. Okay, that's obviously going to lead us astray in this case, and can also lead us astray when we're looking at the biblical text. So we're going to need to look at more than just what meaning it usually takes or more often has, and examine it in the context to really understand what it means. Okay, now if we do the same with heart here, we see all these definitions, and heart basically breaks down like this. It's a bodily organ, a central part of the body, the seat of emotions, so on and so forth. Now, if we just randomly start putting these meanings into the sentence, we can see just how far astray we can go if we're not paying attention to the context that these words are in. So, for example, we could get sentences like, Tom had a physical sensation that he should put his central organ into his work. Right? Doesn't make a lot of sense. But that's going with the most predominant meanings of those words. Another one we could get would be, Tom explored the idea that he should put his deepest desires into his work. It's getting a little closer, but you see it's still not quite right. Another would be, Tom was aware that he should put his card game into his work. Now we're just incredibly far off from what that sentence means. And lastly, and just somewhat humorously, Tom was persuaded that he should put his conventional two-lobed representation, usually colored red or pink, of the chambered muscular organ and vertebrates that pumps blood received from the veins into the arteries, thereby maintaining the flow of blood through the entire circulatory system into his work. Right? So these aren't what that sentence was getting at. So for a correct study, word study, you need to make sure to consider the following things. First of all, context, context, context. Look at the surrounding sentence, see what's going to make sense. Don't just pick the meanings of the word or try to understand what the word means based on what it's usually defined as, but examine its context and see what the word can mean based on that context. Next, see if one or more meanings can be used. Sometimes writers of biblical texts will use a word in one sense, but will also be aware of the other meanings and will utilize those meanings to make the text richer and deeper and fuller. So you'll want to still be aware of those multiple meanings when you examine a sentence or a phrase in the text. Next, make sure to avoid what's called the root fallacy. The root fallacy is only going with the root definition of a word. So for example, with feel, you could probably say the root of the word to feel is that physical sensation, but the meaning of the word feel has grown so much, and we can use it in that emotional sense, or in the sense of believing. And so we're going to, in the sentence that we had, we're going to want to go with that sense of believing and feeling, rather than going with the root of the word, which is denoting that physical organ in our bodies. So avoiding the root fallacy, not just going with what the root of the word means, but allowing the context to dictate the meaning more. And finally, make sure you're aware of how much you're reading into the word. Remember we talked about eisegesis and wanting to avoid reading into the word. So making sure we're not reading too much theology or our ideas or our beliefs into the text. And also make sure we're not reading too much of whatever the original meaning may be. Maybe this word has moved a long way from that original meaning, and we're not supposed to read that meaning into it. So those are two things that we're also going to want to make sure that we're not reading into the word. So this is just a nice quick summary. Word studies are something that we're going to look at more, but this is a good introduction, and you can see how important it is to examine words and see how important they can be to a text, how important understanding them each individually is to understanding a sentence itself, but also when we start examining words that we might not be familiar with, the problems we might run into along the way when we try to understand a text. So this has just been a real quick introduction to a word study.